Joe Goldberg is the manager of a bookstore. One day, a woman by the name of Guinevere Beck catches his eye. She's an aspiring writer and student. Joe lives next to neighbor Claudia, who has a son Paco, with an abusive boyfriend Ron filling the silence Joe would much more prefer. After taking an interest in this woman in the bookstore, Joe begins stalking her social media accounts, attempting to learn more about her, even finding her home and places of work. Other information he finds is that she cozies on up to her pervy professor and has an on and off again relationship with boyfriend Benji. Joe follows Beck to an open mic bar and back to the train station, whereby she stumbles onto the tracks drunk. He saves her and takes her home unscathed. Reporting a gas leak to get into her home, Joe pretends to be her boyfriend, snooping around the place, taking a look on her computer as well as stealing her underwear. Ron finds a rare book given to Paco by Joe and rips it up. He mentions to the kid that a good hiding place for valuables is in the ceiling above the bathroom. With a pre-made prison underneath the bookshop, meant for the maintenance and storage of old and rare books, Joe lures Benji down there, recognizing he's not good for Beck. The night Beck fell onto the tracks, he stole her phone, being able to keep an eye on her and her friends. Unfortunately, Benji remembers Joe's face that night as he dropped Beck off after the incident. Not wanting to follow through with anything after being groped by her professor, Beck meets up with Joe instead, inviting him along to best friend Peach's party. Peach and Joe don't exactly see eye to eye, and he and Beck go to leave. They bump into an old friend of Joe's ex, Candice, who mysteriously ran off to Italy one day. After a kiss with Beck, Joe delivers a coffee to Benji, however the drink contains nuts, of which Benji is allergic to, causing him to have a reaction and eventually die. Beck questions Joe about Candice a little as he decides what to do with Benji's body. Needing to get rid of it, he gives Paco a list of supplies to go fetch for him, as the power goes out in the store, causing the decaying body to rot faster. Ron finds the list and reports it to the police, with Joe convincing them the supplies were for his garden plot. He gets rid of the body eventually by burning it in the forest. Joe's suspicion of Peach increases, and so he steals her laptop, finding hundreds of photos of Beck, half naked and most taken without her knowledge. Adamant he must protect Beck, Joe attacks Peach, but she survives, saying she must have a stalker. Using this opportunity, Peach convinces Beck to come away with her for a bit. Joe follows them, however crashes his car, hitting his head, but proceeds to go and break into Peach's home. Thanks to the crash, Joe begins to hallucinate, seeing Candice walk around the house as we find out she cheated on him with someone she convinced him was just her brother. Joe finds a gun in the house, hiding quickly as Beck and Peach have an argument. Beck leaves and soon after Peach finds Joe, knocking him out. He tries to escape but gets shot in the leg. Managing to knock her down, he grabs the gun, kills her, and leaves a fake suicide note. The next thing we see is Joe in a therapy room, revealing that he and Beck are over. She began working at the bookstore and began seeing a therapist herself, but he was convinced her secrecy was her cheating on him. He began seeing this therapist, Dr. Nikki, the same as Beck's, under a different name in order to break in and listen to the recordings of Beck's sessions. Realizing she wasn't cheating, Joe decides to move on from Beck, smashing up her old phone and dating Karen, a friend of Claudia's. 3 months go by and Beck has a book deal and Joe and Karen are doing well, bumping into each other one evening, relighting their relationship. Claudia's an addict, and so Joe and Karen take her to the glass room to help her detox and get clean, with Paco living with him temporarily. During this, Joe cheats on Karen with Beck, eventually ending their relationship. Karen goes to see Beck, telling her to be careful and not to end up like Candice. Joe wakes up one night shouting that name, raising Beck's concerns once again, asking Joe more about her as well as her old friends. Joe was cheated on by Candice with Elijah, the person who gave her her first record deal. In anger, Joe pushed him off a rooftop, killing him. Beck confronts Joe about her again. It was Mr. Mooney, the owner of the bookstore, that helped Joe cover his tracks that night. Whilst harsh, he did care for Joe, the only person who ever seemed to. Beck starts getting calls and messages from her therapist, with Joe finding out she was cheating after all. He confronts her about it, but it's resolved and Joe's dreams about Candice stop. As Joe goes out to get breakfast, Paco returns a book he borrowed to Beck, telling her about the hiding place Joe suggested. Intrigued, she goes to the bathroom and finds a box filled with her underwear, various phones, Candice's necklace, and a jar of teeth. off which she drops, smashing it on the floor. Joe finds the remnants of the jar, realizing Beck knows, grabs her and takes her to the glass room under the bookstore. During this time, Claudia is given a concussion by Ron, with Joe finding Pucko at the store trying to steal a gun to go and kill Ron. He returns to Beck, showing her evidence as to why he killed who he killed and why they were only bringing her down. He nullifies any suspicion by convincing her friends that she was on a writer's retreat, finding out about this PI that is looking into Peach's death. Pucko attacks Ron and runs off, with Joe finding them, killing Ron and getting rid of the body, with Pucko keeping the secret. Whilst locked in the room Beck had been writing, she wrote about her story with the therapist and how he was so obsessed with her, giving Joe a way out of this mess. She earned his trust enough to open the door, stabbing him as he stepped inside, locking it behind her. He has a spare key, however, grabbing Beck and killing her. 4 months later, Beck's book has been released. Joe had planted the box of evidence at Dr. Nicky's house, setting him up with the book backing it up. Meanwhile, Pucko and Claudia move away, starting anew as Joe continues his old life in the bookstore, until he's approached by someone familiar, Candace, who's supposed to be dead? Joe moves to Los Angeles, running away from Candace and hoping for a fresh start, going by the name Will Bettelheim. He finds an apartment, meeting landlord Delilah, a reporter, and her sister, Ellie. Needing money to get out of the city he hates so much as quickly as possible, Joe gets a job at a Navarin, with someone by the name of Love Quinn catching his eye. Love and 40 are siblings, their parents own a Navarin, and despite his interactions with Love, Joe tries not to give in once again, but it's too late. Ellie helps Joe get on social media, using this to find out a little more about Love. She's a widow, her partner James passed away a couple years ago. She's also an incredible cook. As he returns home, Ellie reveals a Jasper is looking for him. Well, he's after the real Will Bettelheim, who's locked in another glass room built and contained within a hired storage locker. Will is a hacker who sells clean identities, but Joe stole his identity and now a man called Jasper is after him, as Will never revealed his face to this man. Love kisses Joe and he agrees to meet with her friends, however has to cancel as Jasper finds him at a Navarin. Will owes Jasper 50 grand, cutting off Joe's finger, giving him a time limit to get it to him. Otherwise reattachment is unlikely. Will unfortunately isn't very well and needs his meds, but Joe manages to get some information out of him about a guy that owes him money. He meets with this man at a party he's throwing, bumping into Delilah and a man called Henderson, or Hendy, who's a famous comedian. It wasn't money the man gave him, but pills. Seeing no other option, Joe shows Jasper the glass room with Will inside, explaining everything. Jasper goes to attack him, but Joe strikes first, killing him. Delilah explains to Joe about Henderson and how she was at just 17, drugged and raped by him. Joe finds out that Ellie, who's 15, hangs around Henderson and decides he should protect her. He manages to talk his way into a party of his, looking for dirt on the comedian. However, 40 tags along trying to talk with Henderson about a potential project, but ends up causing the party to be shut down after a drug-fueled meltdown. Joe has Will search Henderson's stolen laptop but finds nothing. However, 40 mentions something about a secret room in the comedian's house. Will helps Joe break into Henderson's house, whereby he finds Polaroids of unconscious underage women, including Delilah. He leaves the photos on Delilah's doorstep and they are shown to Fincher, a cop and friend of hers. Not much can be done as Henderson isn't in the photos, and so there's no proof it was him. Ellie goes to Henderson's wanting to show a short film she's been working on. However, Joe witnesses him drug Ellie. Joe drugs Henderson's drink, also knocking them both out and waking Hendy up once again in his secret room, planning on filming a confession. However, he accidentally knocks him down the stairs, killing him, with Ellie waking up and leaving. Cleaning the crime scene of evidence that he was there, Joe is almost caught by Fincher, offering him a pair of headphones owned by Henderson. After building enough trust and understanding between the pair, Joe releases Will. Meanwhile, 40 meets someone, Candace, or as she goes by now, Amy Adam. Falling even more for love, Joe is asked to attend her parents' Wellkend, a wellness retreat organised to celebrate their anniversary. Joe does his homework, of course, meaning to make a good impression. Henderson is found and his death is reported as a suicide, with Delilah being questioned by the police, covering up for Ellie. Ellie finds the photos and Delilah explains what Henderson was actually like, but she doesn't believe her. At the retreat, 40 introduces Candace to Joe and he can hardly believe it. Flashback to when she left him. He took her to the woods to explain and calm things down with a picnic, only for her to run, with Joe leaving, thinking he had accidentally killed her. Candace found Joe thanks to a video of him helping 40 at Henderson's party. 40 spends the weekend trying to impress his parents, eventually going to his father for money. Not being the first time this has happened, his father refuses, dismissing his drug problems. 40 goes off the rails and ruins the renewal of his parents' vows. Love tells Joe a family secret. The reason why 40 is so damaged. They hired Sophia, a 19-year-old from Spain. 40 thought she was his first love and has never recognised it was actually abuse, as he was 13. They were caught together and she was fired, causing her suicide. Delilah finds Ellie after she stole the pictures. She believes and wants to get rid of them, as that's all the girls will be known for online if they hand them in. Flashback again. Candace wakes up in the woods and reports Joe to the police. She doesn't have any proof of what he did and off the record is told to stay dead and leave. Having a private conversation, Candace tells Joe she's here waiting for him to mess up, with 40 revealing Candace gave him a great book he wants to adapt, Beck's book. Meanwhile, Henderson's death is officially reported as a murder. At the funeral, Joe begins to worry that perhaps he didn't clean the crime scene properly, but he has other things to worry about. He thinks Candace is talking with a cop, having him followed perhaps. Heading back to Inavron, there he is again, talking with Love. She admits that he's a PI hired to look into Candace, as people often get close to the family for the money. Candace pokes around Joe's apartment but is caught by Delilah. Making up an excuse, she manages to crack a window open for later. When she returns later, she finds Love waiting for her. She knows her real name, and Candace tries to explain about who Joe is and Beck, but Love won't believe it. She pays Candace off and she leaves town, but Love confronts Joe. Thinking fast, he admits his name is Joe, not Will, and that Candace is just a crazy ex that stalked him. That's why he came to LA and changed his name. He went on one date with Beck, barely knew her, painting Candace out to be a psycho. Upon hearing this, Love breaks it off with him. Needing a rebound, Joe hooks up with a stressed Delilah as she's obsessing over the Henderson case. Love moves on, hooking up with her ex-husband's best friend, Milo, who 40 is not keen on and so decides to help Joe get back in the dating world to make Love jealous. Meanwhile, he also hires Ellie to help with the film, and Delilah's story is set to be published in Variety magazine. She hooks up with Joe again. This time they are caught and arrested for indecent exposure, with Fincher recognizing him when releasing the pair, telling Delilah of his suspicions, as no way he could afford the headphones he was given on the night of Henderson's murder. Attempting to make things serious with Love, Milo gets into a fight with 40, punching him, ending that possibility. Delilah does some digging and finds the video Candace saw of Joe and 40 at Henderson's party. She looks around his apartment, finding the keys to the storage locker. She goes over there, finding the glass room, but is cornered by Joe, who set up a camera since Candace broke in. Joe doesn't want to hurt Delilah, but he needs to make some arrangements before he can let her go. He cuffs Delilah to the table, setting the timer on them for 16 hours. However, complications arise as 40's film is set to be made, but he needs a completed script, and so with 40 hiring some people to ensure they stay in a hotel room until it is complete, Joe gets to work quickly. Ellie is also there to help, however she is allowed to leave. Joe's night gets even wilder as 40 escapes through the window and reveals he drugs them both with LSD. It begins to kick in as 40 suggests roleplay as Beck and Dr. Nikki to understand their characters. Things get a little too real for Joe, however. Using a safe word to end all this, Joe leaves the room but wakes up much later with blood on his hands. Is it real, or is this just another hallucination? He picks up a call from Love, who says she wants to try again after a word with her friends, and finding a goodbye note from Joe. He suggests they leave together and she agrees. Joe finds 40 in the hotel room still, and he's figured it out. He knows it wasn't Dr. Nikki. It was this mysterious boyfriend mentioned briefly in the book. He says he knows, because he too performed a crime of passion. 40 found out Sophia was seeing a college guy, you see. One day, he blacked out and woke to find he had killed her in a bout of rage. With the drugs wearing off, Joe made his way back to the storage locker before the cuffs let Delilah free, so he and Love could sort everything out. With seconds to go, he arrived, only to find Delilah's dead body, covered in blood, throat slit. So much of the previous night was a blur. Joe frantically tries to map out everything, trying to convince himself it wasn't him who had killed Delilah. Heading to Anavrin, he finds out he was there that night. 40 went with him and he reveals Joe made them take him to go see Delilah. Meanwhile, he hooked up with Candice, who had not left after all. Candice, after reading 40's script, told him he's cracked it. Joe's the ex-boyfriend, but 40 won't believe it. Looking through her messages, she sees a video 40 sent her the night before, showing the place he dropped Joe off to go and see Delilah. Heading over there, she finds Joe looking over Delilah's body, locking him inside the glass room with her, and messaging Love to show her what Joe is really like. Love arrives and Joe admits it all. Everything he's done for her. Running off sobbing, Candice goes after her as Joe accepts his punishment. One day, a young Joe couldn't take it anymore and shot his abusive father. Comforting him, his mother told him it was something he had to do. He was a good person after all. Candice finds Love throwing up into a trash can, when suddenly she grabs a broken bottle, turns around and stabs her, stuffing the lifeless body into her car. Love heads back to Joe, but he can't believe it. He thinks he broke her. It was Love that killed Delilah, and it was Love that killed Sophia, wanting to protect the two most important people in her life. This time, it was Love that noticed Joe first. Recognizing a darkness, having her PI do some investigating, she found out about him and Beck and his past, wanting to fix him. But when Joe was ready to give up on them, she went to the storage locker and found Delilah, killing her and formulating a plan whereby she's remembered as a feminist icon, standing up to her abuser Henderson, and Ellie has a good life ahead of her eventually. Meanwhile, Fincher takes Ellie in after a tip-off from Love. Ellie phones 40 for help, but he's out of town visiting Dr. Nikki. 40 asks him for help. He knows now Candice was telling the truth, which means his sister is in trouble. Ellie's let out thanks to 40's lawyer, but Fincher tells her just to keep an eye out. Meanwhile, Joe convinces Love to open the door to remove Delilah's body. But that moment, he grabs her and holds the sharp cuffs to her throat before Love claims she's pregnant. This changes everything. All Joe has wanted is the perfect family. They go to Lucy and Sunrise's wedding, with 40 blowing up both their phones and not being allowed in himself. He goes to Anavrin, closing down the place and telling them to meet him there. Love goes in first to try and calm him down. In the meantime, Joe spots Ellie hiding round the back. She overheard 40 ranting about everything he's done and blames him for Delilah's disappearance. Joe blames the Quinns, says he got mixed up in a powerful family, but she can get away. He sends her off to start a new life, intending to send money every few months to keep her safe. Joe then enters the store, and failing to calm 40 down or convince him of anything, he takes out a gun ready to shoot Joe Goldberg. Just in time, Fincher steps in, shooting 40, saving Joe's life. Thanks to Fincher's impeccable timing, 40 was the lead suspect in Henderson's murder, which was of course all covered up by the Quinn family, and he and Love could move away from this place, starting afresh with their baby, until he notices his new neighbor, someone new.
See you soon, neighbor.